Welcome to Redefining ABCD. Redefining
All right, I'm starting Audacity now. Okay, cool. All right, so, oh shoot, my phone just turned on, sorry.
It's okay.
So, hey everybody, welcome back to this episode of Larger Than Us. For today, Sneha and I are going to basically just dive straight into the idea of self-love. And kind of what we mean by that is like how we define self-love for ourselves, and also talk about a few debating topics or like quote unquote controversial, I guess, within the umbrella of self love. And then we'll kind of wrap it up with how we kind of connect back to the South Asian community and how the idea of self love is perceived as in the South Asian community, and how we can kind of break the stigma of that being in towards like the shameful side to more of like a, let's celebrate it because it'll help you love others as well. So to kind of start us off, we got to start off with like the definition of self love. So I guess, what does self love mean to you?
So for me, I think I perceive self-love as this sort of little things that you do in your life, or little things or mental notes that you make in your head, in order to enact this sort of gradual change in the way that your brain processes negative situations. So if they're just little changes that you make in your life, they don't have to be this big drastic thing, right? Or big 30-minute clunk of time that you're trying to like put aside to like do something for self-love. No, it's just the way you're just changing the way that your brain thinks and perceives negative situations. And that can mean so many different things for different people. For me, I struggle a lot with kind of forgiving myself. So, and that like with little things, like things that people don't really think much about, or other people don't think much about it. So I'm told, I just hyper focus on them, and I just ruminate on them over and over and over again. So, example like fidgeting or stuttering in conversations, or repeating words in conversation, repeating myself, repeating phrases, in the way I talk. I think about these things so much and I hate myself for it. And it doesn't happen in when it's happening. It's usually afterwards. I'm playing it back in my head. I'm like, oh no, this is bad, this is awful, this sounded gross, it sounded so unprofessional. And for those kinds of things, I've been, for me, self-love is just practicing and being like, hey, like that's okay. No one really thinks about it. It's okay. Like forgiving myself for those things. So I don't know. I
Yeah,
don't know what you think. Like, what is your definition of self love?
it's kind of in the similar lines. Like I completely agree with you. Like I tend to like whenever I'm like in a social situation, I kind of like play back the conversation in my head, like when I'm by myself, and I'm like, oh my god, I said that in a group full of like five different people. Why did I say that? Or like something like that. I'll just
Right.
think about how cringy some action or like thing that I talked about might have been in a conversation. In reality, it might have not been as cringy as perceived by me. Um, so I definitely like feel that. But I believe self love is accepting your flaws in the fact where like you're not going to be perfect in the way that you expect yourself. So accepting that there are some things that you need to work on, and just continuously just working on it is something that I feel like that idea is really hard to accept. Um, so I think that is a part of self love. I think just like with that though, highlighting your strengths. I had a really good co-op advisor. Um, when we were prepping for job interviews, she was just like, a lot of times people ask like what your weakness is and how you're going to fix your weaknesses, but a lot of times you don't really think about that for your strengths. So like her idea was you have your like acknowledge your weaknesses but grow and invest in your strengths, which I thought was really interesting. And I think highlighting that too is also kind of self-love. And kind of going back to our episode with Priya, just like how she said her idea of self love was like being comfortable in your own skin, kind of just like wraps it all for me. Like I think just being comfortable with who you are and the fact that you are growing is self love,
Mhm.
and just not letting other people change the way you think about yourself. I think is a really big step in terms of that too.
No, I agree. I feel like I don't know, like self love in itself is just just doing what you need to do to make yourself happy. I feel like just whatever that means to you, there's that what is that, the from Parks and Rec, treat yourself,
Yes,
like
I was thinking that too.
occasionally you're good. Like we live in such a high-paced, fast world where there's so many sensory information coming at you every single day, all the time. There's always going to be work. There's always going to be work that you have to do. There's always going to be things that are going to be bothering you. It's never going to be this like really peaceful, like beautiful utopian time. It's never going to be like that, realistically speaking.
Yeah.
So self-love is just identifying that, understanding that, accepting it, and then carving out time within that chaotic lifestyle in order to just take some time for yourself and be like, hey, so like I'm gonna do something that I love to do. I'm gonna do something that I would that isn't for anyone except for myself. I'm not doing it to appease someone. I'm not doing it to look better or like make my image look better. No, I'm just doing it because I like it. And I feel like everyone should have at least that one thing that they can lean back on and kind of go back to when life gets chaotic. Because, you need that grounding. Or it doesn't even have to be a thing. Maybe it's a person. Maybe it's a group of people. Maybe it's a certain social situation that you
Or like
really
a hobby.
enjoy. Yeah, or a hobby or something. So self-love is just identifying those things and learning to lean back on them when you need to.
Yeah, and like going back to what you said of like it's not just like a you have to carve out 30 minutes of your day to do this. I agree with you. I think it's something that's like a constant practice that you need in your life that like it needs to be integrated with the way you think. It's like a way of thinking more than like a self-care practice. I think self-care helps with that, but like the idea of understanding self-love is like more of like a mentality rather than like a hey, I need to add this to my routine.
Right. And that also comes with just identifying like what situations you just aren't comfortable in, and then not avoiding them, but learning to kind of step back from them when it gets too much, especially if it's something you can't avoid. Like if you are not okay in certain situations but you can't get out of it, it's like part of work or it's part of an everyday practice that you can't get out of. Just learning to like balance that out with self-love, with things that will make you happy, and like get rid of those things almost. So I don't know, it's
Yeah.
difficult, it's a balance, it's like something that I think everyone is just constantly working at and trying to get better at. So
Yeah, it's a constant battle. You're not like once you figure it out, quote unquote, it's not like you're done. Like there's going to be so many things that come across yourself in life that
right.
is going to challenge that way of thinking, and it's going to help you grow that idea that you have for yourself. Like
Well, yeah,
just
and it could change. It could change as you go through.
right,
Like what
right.
you consider self-love in like I don't know, high school is probably not the same as what you're gonna think in like 30 or 40 or 50.
Like
Like
when you
it's
have
always gonna be
kids.
changing. Yeah, like that could change. That could
Mhm.
change at all times. So it's just literally a direct connection to your surroundings and what you're going through. So, you know, it's
Along those lines, it's like things that could affect your ability to like love yourself will also change throughout. Like when
mhm.
you're younger, just like wanting to fit in could be something that affects your way of your life. But like maybe when you grow up and you're like starting to have kids, I know for a lot of women, like pregnancies, like postpartum depression, and then like your body just changing drastically at such a fast pace. So like in 9 months, your body expands and then goes back into itself. Like that can also like that body image could affect you. I know as college students, just like trying to find yourself with like identity
Yeah.
is definitely something that could affect. So there's a lot of things that can affect you in that sense.
Yeah, and just like learning to like forgive yourself in those situations. Like, hey, you're going through a change. Like, it's okay if you don't. Like, it doesn't also have to be this like thing that if you fail once, you're just never gonna love yourself ever again. It's like, no,
Right.
you're gonna have slip ups. You're gonna have days where it's not gonna feel like that. But just like always remembering to come back to it. Always remembering that, hey, it's not always gonna be like this. It's okay, it will work itself out. The world is not going to crumble under your feet, although the pandemic got real close. So I don't want to say things too early, but um, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Just understanding that everything is going to change and that's okay. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So I don't know.
How do you feel? How do you feel social media impacts us? Because as we are in the age of social media dictating how everything goes, like in many industries. So how do you kind of feel that social media's influence on the idea of loving yourself?
So I recently watched this documentary, that very popular documentary about social dilemma, or it's called The Social Dilemma.
Yeah,
It's on Netflix, and it's about how the algorithm or social media's algorithm is shaping the way that people are receiving media and digesting content and information. And it was talking about how because the algorithm is based on what you click and it just adds and adds and adds, it is highly polarizing in social situations because it really puts a divide between, oh, these people are pro climate change, these people are anti climate change, and there's like a huge divide, and it's causing like civil war essentially is what they predicted, which is kind of horrifying.
yeah,
Very very scary stuff. Don't know, like I think so in that whole diaspora of things. So the idea of self-love is also part of that, right? People have different perspectives on what self-love is, and it's such a polarized sort of topic. Because if you hop on social media, people be like, oh yeah, like, I read a book the other day after a long time and I just love myself and it's great. But then on the other side, it could be like, oh, but books give me so much anxiety. Why are people like, ew, why are we doing this? Like, let's go back to TV shows and movies. And there's this whole argument. Oh my God. It's so tedious. It's like, why are we gatekeeping what self-love is? Like, I don't understand. Like, it's just different for different people. Accept it and move on. Like, it's not like one of those huge, it's not like climate change where it's such a huge topic that could really affect the world. It is literally just how people perceive themselves. So why are we arguing about it?
but
I
I
don't know.
mean, the way you perceive yourself can affect how you react or like interact
Yeah,
with others. But I'm so glad
right.
you brought up the social dilemma because my technical inner nerd, I was like just coming out like yes, because I honestly I think the biggest takeaway you can take from the social dilemma is that whatever environment you are put in or you put yourself in is magnified on social media.
Yeah.
Big example is Facebook. Like, if you live in the South, your ideas are most probably like pro guns, pro life, whatever those like those political beliefs. They're magnified on Facebook. Like, that's all the ads you'll get, and it's like really creepy because it'll like basically monitor what you buy, what you look at. Maybe sometimes there's a theory that like whenever you talk, like the Google or like the Siri or whatnot is actually listening in and adding that to the algorithm too. So all of these factors are playing into this. And so it's not really giving you a neutral ground. It's just essentially magnifying your thoughts. And if you have such a toxic mindset, that is when negative things happen in the world. Like that's where unfortunately school shootings, um, violence and like like dangerous political beliefs and rallies, like that's how those types of things are like put into practice or put into action, is because social media is magnifying that.
Right. And it's like perpetuating your current thought process. So if I'm going through an anxiety attack or a depressive episode and I get on Twitter or Instagram and start liking a lot of things like, oh, like, depression sucks, here are the symptoms of it, or here is what people should be looking out for people with mental health issues. If I start liking those things, it's automatically going to start putting me in this loop of like, oh, you're depressed, you're anxiety, here you might like this, you might like that, and you just get a lot of like these negative posts that start entering your feed. And I feel like it's so bad because it perpetuates your current feelings. At the same time, if you're liking things that are very toxic positive or very
Yeah,
self-love, like self-love driven, but it's like more like you have to be like this, gatekeeping self-love,
yeah,
then that's all you're going to see for the next couple of days. And that's so dangerous because it can keep you in thought loops. It can keep you um in mind places where you should be able to process it faster and move on, but your social media is almost keeping you there and holding you there until the algorithm is done and then you move on to something else. Just
Yeah, it's
scary.
like it's boxing in your beliefs into a specific way. So like a lot of times media isn't the best in terms of mental health, like we kind of talked about in our
Yeah.
episode in season two. But like the concept of self-love, everybody always associates the way to reach self-love is self-care or whatever.
Right.
And so that just boxes in your belief like I need to do XYZ in order to love myself, which means like I need to go to the spa every once in a while, I need to do this or this.
Right.
And
Right.
that like I believe that like self love doesn't come from materialistic things, because that can get very dangerous, because not everybody is rich enough to like pamper themselves and whatnot. So like
Yeah.
it just confines you and it doesn't allow you to think for yourself. It just magnifies what's around you to like kind of like a peer pressure in a sense.
Right.
So
No, that speaking of that includes like therapy. Therapy is such a big tool that people will throw in your face sometimes and be like, you have to get therapy in order to self-love. Like, no, 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 no. Like sometimes like therapy is so expensive, A. B, it's a privilege to find a therapist that actually works with you. Like
mhm.
it is a process. It is something that you have to sit and do over a course of a couple months, couple years. Like it can take a while for you to find that one person, that one professional therapist or therapy who can help you get through the emotions that you're dealing with or the lifelong stuff that you're dealing with. So just throw like it's so casually thrown on social media, right? Like, oh, like, if you want to care about if you like with that whole self-care thing, like you should just go get therapy and you'll fix yourself.
It solves
And
all, quote
it
unquote.
solves all. It solves all. Just like if and you see it a lot, especially I've seen so many like posts about like, oh, if men would just get therapy, then we wouldn't have to deal with half the stuff. It's like, but it's the same issue, right? Like it's the same thing. Like why is that being thrown around as like the only way to have self-love? I think you yourself can just change the way your outlook on certain things. It's a personal journey. It's not something that should be connected to social media, but it is,
Right.
and it's bad. But yeah, I don't know. I was gonna ask, do you think there's any like positive spin on this? Like, do you think there's any positive influence that social media has? Because we have been talking a lot about the negatives, but I don't
Yeah.
know.
That's a good question, because honestly, whenever I think about tech, like the applications of social media specifically, like all the big FANG companies, you like I always see a lot more bad than good. But it's, we gotta talk about the good. I just don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah,
Like I mean, like maybe the bringing like allowing people who have like the positive thought processes, it allows them to put their thoughts into the game as well. I feel that could be like that's like a good thing. Like as much as
yeah,
there's bad, good people can also post content and kind of help change that mindset. Because like at the end of the day, like social media and all, like tech is a tool. Like the users
right.
behind it is what is going to propagate like how you use it.
Hmm.
So if we have more good people putting on more content or putting more like beneficial content, that can be more overpowering. So it's the way we have to change the way people think about using social media, so that the tool can be more beneficial than like negative, as we see in like
Right.
all these tech documentaries on
You're right,
Netflix.
right. No, no, no. I mean, I think it's good though, because I mean, with those documentaries, like a lot of people are starting to wake up from. At least they know, right? Like there's at least an awareness that this algorithm is kind of like weird and like maybe not. Maybe let's alter the way that we like things and do things so that it's a positive experience, not just a negative one. But at the same time, like I don't know, like it's even if you know it in theory, it's hard to practice. Like
Yeah.
everyone is on social media all the time. The social media world, the world of social media runs faster, I think,
Yep.
than the actual world. So it can really skew the way you think about things and how you process things. Like you might be on social media and like, 3 self-love posts and think that, "Oh, I'm okay now." But maybe you're not. You didn't ever process those information. You just kind of
By
it's almost like
impulse, you
yeah, you just by
like it.
impulse and did something and I don't know. Like maybe you haven't really processed those feelings yet and you just feel like you have because social media has made you think that way. I don't know. Or maybe we're
I
just
mean,
going down a very cynical route. I don't
yeah,
know.
I don't know, because like not to like make a tangent off of this, but there's another documentary called The Coded Bias that I absolutely like recommend anybody to look at, and it kind of analyzes how ethical issues and tech kind of play hand in
Mm,
hand, and how like the
yeah.
development of tech is affected by who is developing it. But in that documentary, they break down that like the transparency of what goes behind that algorithm isn't there in American tech companies. Like Instagram's not going to
Really?
tell you, they have no control over their algorithm because they set the
Right.
baseline for their AI and then just let it run. And but like in other countries like China, like as much like they are transparent. They're like, hey, we're gonna take this data, like your face, your biometrics, and we're gonna use it for this, and like calculate
Right.
like your credit score off of it or like your citizenship score. So like everybody is like knows or is aware of how their data is being used, so everybody
Mhm.
accepts the fact that like their data is being used in this way. So
Right.
I think that kind of plays into effectiveness because we really don't know what our data is being used because there's commercial people selling our data, then there's governments using our data and whatnot. So like, and then there's also like racial bias, unconditional bias, gender roles, like all those like bad things that we see in society is magnified on art. So we don't know like what's going on in the behind the scenes. And I think that is kind of like a trigger and why we see social media being so cynical on ours. Because I feel like if we knew how our data is being used, we might not be as so cynical towards like the influences social media has on
Right. Right.
ourselves, or like we would find ways to like use it for the better. I feel like if it was more
Right.
transparent.
No, I agree. That's yeah.
So I
It's a
didn't
lot.
mean to go on
No,
a
no,
tangent.
no.
I love
It's
this
good.
topic.
It's
I
good.
love this
We'll put it
topic.
on hold though. We'll put it on hold though because we definitely have another episode like specifically about social. Like I have so much to talk about this. Like I can go down the Trump route because that's like
Oh,
literally an prime example of like someone who fucking used social media and like definitely just went down a wrong route. But
election
anywho,
madness.
yeah,
Yeah,
like and
yeah.
like creating a group under like it's kind of scary that it someone
Oh,
as like
yeah.
anywho,
We're
moving
talking about
on.
self love today. Self love, self love,
Self love,
self love.
positivity. we're gonna be in a it's fine. It's all good.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on.
So moving on. So okay. So like in self love though, like um there's like this debate, not this debate, but like I've had these conversations with other friends, and it seems like a conversation that multiple other people have with their friends as well. It's just like the idea that in order to like love others, you must love yourself. That's kind of like a thought process that's kind of out in the world right now. What are your thoughts about this? Do you feel like you need to love yourself in order to love others?
I think yes and no. Yes, in that I think in some ways you have to love yourself in order to be able to identify that same love being given to you.
Mm-hmm.
Like you have to know what that feeling is like in order to understand that someone is giving it to you. Because I think for me at least there was definitely a time not that long ago actually where I didn't realize how much I hated myself, because I was wrapped under this whole toxic positivity of I'm fine, everything's okay, but I hate myself, but that's okay. Um, and it's bad because when someone, even friends, um, people that I really care about, family, when they're giving me love, I almost take it for granted, or I used to take it for granted. I used to just be like, oh, but I mean, I don't know what they like about it. I don't know what they like about me. I hate myself. I don't understand. Like I just didn't
Mm,
understand the love that they were giving me. I
yeah,
didn't get
I
it.
get that.
So in that way, I think it is necessary to have some sort of like base level like I love myself. It's going to be fine for you to understand like that someone is giving you that.
Right.
So yes. I don't know if you had any more thoughts on that. I don't want to keep
No.
talking.
No, I no, I agree with you. You like it's not like a sequential step where like you need to
Yeah.
love yourself completely in order to love others. I feel like it's a parallel
Yeah.
because you need to have some level of like ability in your like love in yourself to be able to have a successful relationship. I feel, but also your partner or people around you can help propagate that self love or like
Right.
the idea
Right.
of loving all aspects of yourself. And I think like in a way where you need to have some like self love in order to like make sure like ensure like you have an idea of what you want from a relationship
Mhm.
or like gives you an idea of what you expect from a partner,
Yeah.
but then that can also change and evolve as you kind of fall in love and stuff like
Yeah.
that with other people. And I think it's like a parallel process. It's not like sequential. I think that's the main thing that I feel like the reason why this debate is happening among people.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say like I see it the other way too, like because like the whole point of a relationship with anyone, friendship, family relationship, love interest, love, dating, whatever it is, I think like there is a chance for you to grow with them
Mhm.
in terms of how you perceive yourself. Uh but I don't like I think it's dangerous when it starts becoming like the only way you can have any sort of relationship is to love yourself. I think that's when you get to that extreme, that's when you start holding yourself back from really like relationships that might actually go really well for you. Like this person, this group of people, this family member might be helping you, might be trying to like really like they might be really good for you, but you'll never know because you
Are
put
so
yourself
boosting
down so
yourself.
much.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. So I don't know. Like I think you don't necessarily need to love yourself completely in order to um form those relationships. You shouldn't cut yourself off from that. But at the same time, like you need to love yourself enough to be able to identify it.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, and like if you think about the extreme, like what does it mean to be satisfied with that fully
yeah,
sense of self love? Because some, like as we said before, like in the definition of self love, like it's always going to be changing. So you're never going to be satisfied enough to be like, I'm ready for someone else to love someone else now. Like
right,
you're never going to be satisfied with that. I think.
right. Yeah. No. Yeah. I had something else for this, but I'm blanking. We can cut this out. I'm so sorry.
You're good. Good.
Shoot. There was another thought. Oh man, it was a good one. It's okay. If it comes up later, I'll talk about it. Okay. Um well, I guess I feel like we could talk about that more though.
I think. I mean, it's okay.
Is that
We're already
good?
30 minutes in.
Okay, cool. Let's moving on. Okay, so moving on. So, kind of following that, do you think self-love is a product of confidence, or is confidence a product of self-love? What came first?
That see, when I was like thinking about this question, I was like, I'm confident that I stand in this stance. But then as I was thinking about it, I was like, wait a minute, it's more gray than I think. Because like self love can be a product of confidence, but also confidence can be a product of self love. I think that question, like I kind of just need to go back to like the difference between confidence and ego, because that,
Yeah.
in my opinion, is a determinant of like what side you feel or what comes first, the chicken or the egg, like you kind of said. um,
Right, right.
so I feel like confidence is just like enunciating your strengths and like not to the fact where in ego you're showing it off. I think confidence is accepting that the good things about you, but you're not telling everybody, like you're not telling everybody constantly like I'm good at this, or you're not trying to prove to someone
Right,
else that you're good at something, which I think that's
right.
ego. Ego is when you have overabundance of confidence, but it's for external reasons. Like I need to prove to someone that I'm good at this by flaunting it in my ego. So I think in that sense, confidence goes hand in hand with self love because self love helps you accept yourself and who you
Right.
are. And then confidence in that way is like the same thing where that like you're accepting who you are and you're shining what's good inside of you. So I think it goes hand in hand because like I mean it depends on your like situation too. Like you might like you might start loving yourself or practicing that in your life, and then that could lead to confidence, or like
Yeah.
realizing the confidence that you had that you might have never realized, like say imposter syndrome, you're like going through it, but then you realize, okay, I'm good at certain things. Like that confidence
Right.
could help you love yourself in more holistic ways, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I was gonna kind of to go off that. I think it, like personally, I think it depends on how supported you were as a child in your confidence.
Hmm.
So, like if your family or your friends were very accepting of your confidence, regardless of what that is, like maybe you're super confident about your hair. Maybe you're super confident about the way you look or the way you talk or the opinions that you have. If the people around you are giving you and allowing you to be confident in that area of life, then I think you're naturally like you are naturally equipped to be confident. So for in those situations, maybe self-love is more of a product of confidence, right? You already have confidence, so then you are gaining self-love through that. But in other contexts, if when you were a child, people didn't really trust your confidence. They took it for granted. They didn't really appreciate it. They kind of were like, oh, but why? Like, are you sure? Like, constantly questioning your confidence. I think growing up, once you're grown up, it's almost the opposite, right? You have to
Right.
you're learning self-love to yourself, and as you learn self-love, you gain confidence. So it just depends on how you grew up, like the people that you were surrounded with and how much they allowed you to be yourself.
Right. Yeah, I think personally for me as the second half, that's the reason why
Yeah.
I like said the way that I said this for like my answer, quote unquote, just because growing up I had
Right.
really low self-confidence. I mean,
Mhm.
still I do now too, but like I'm working towards getting confidence, and I think the ability of like identifying my strengths and like loving that, like loving myself or accepting my flaws per se, is helping me get to like self love, or like the idea of like just constantly loving yourself
Right.
throughout
Right.
practice. So
Yeah.
you're right. It's based on experiences and upbringing, I feel.
Yeah, I'm definitely in that second belt. I was a very not confident person when I'm still not really, but I think I've learned to fake it a little bit enough to be functional. So it's good.
We're working on
it's,
it. We're working on
it's,
it. Like,
we're getting there. It's a learning curve. All right.
honestly, yeah, yeah.
It's fine. But yeah.
Oh, yeah, but along those lines, I guess, do you think the people that you surround yourself with influences the way you perceive how you should
hmm
love yourself, or what the idea of loving yourself means?
100%. I think the
Same.
people around you. Well, okay. Here's the thing. As someone who's very heavily influenced by the people around her, like I need to be very careful, like of who I keep around myself. I'm so aware of this because I am like an emotional sponge. Like my brain is an emotional
I
sponge.
get
I
that.
will take up everyone's trauma and just hold it all in, and then never let go until they completely do something stupid and I have to leave. I have to run away because it's
Yeah.
too much. It's too much to process, too much to handle. I took up all their trauma. It's bad. So I'm very cautious of the people around me and who I let in and who I allow myself to express certain things to, right? So as someone like that, like self love specifically, it's contagious. So like just like negativity, self love is contagious. If one person, that's what I usually check in some of my friend groups. Are people taking care of themselves?
Mhm.
Are people like allowing themselves to set boundaries and allowing themselves to like step away from certain situations? If that's the case, like I am more comfortable around these people because I'm like, okay, I can also do that. Like if I can do that. Like I'm allowed to do that in the situation because they're setting the standards for what is allowed and what's not allowed. And that's great. So I think yes, people really do influence like self-love. Like if it only takes one bad seed in the group to like really
Oh
make
yeah.
make changes in a group. So I don't know.
You
It's
like you like
hard.
read my mind. I was about to say the exact same thing. What do I do now?
I don't
But
know.
like, no, I'm kidding. But I was like, I agree. I'm like the exact same way too. I think that's why we click really well, because like we feed off of each other's like
Mhm.
emotions, I guess. Because like I'm like that too. Like just like you said, like there's a saying that a smile is contagious, right? But yeah, even a frown can be contagious, y'all. Because toxic mindset. Like if I surround, like I've
Right.
noticed when I was younger, or like whenever I had to like talk to like relatives and just like the Indian culture, just like that cultural differences or whatever, being surrounded by like a really toxic mindset was not healthy. Like I started seeing myself in ways I'm like, I don't like how I am acting. I don't
Yeah.
like how I'm like trying to constantly like put up this front to protect myself, because like that's just dangerous. And I definitely feel like the people that you're surrounding yourself does affect that, because I started to see my personality change, and I like once I sense I don't like how I'm acting around certain types of people, I'm like, I need to step back. I
Yeah.
need to find a different environment. Because then you start like overthinking and you're overconscious about everything that you do, and it's just not healthy. Um,
Well, yeah, and it sucks too, especially if like you're very aware that it's happening. You're aware of who's causing this issue, but you can't seem to tear yourself away until you yourself become that person. You become the negativity that you never thought you would become. Like
mhm.
I've been in situations where like I perceive something negative or like some sort of thing from other people, and then I basically mirror them or start mirroring them, and then it just starts going like I was that person. Like where I was the one being negative, I was the one putting a frown, and that might be, mental health issues or something external, but it's still something that like it changes things. It changes how the group is
Yeah.
is put
I
together.
don't I don't
So
think it's mental health. Like if you have mental health
yeah,
issues, you're
okay,
gonna be this way. I don't think
right,
that. I
right,
think it's just the way. Like I think it's a science. Honestly, like
yeah.
I am not in the field of neuroscience or psychology, so I can't say anything. But I feel like there's a science behind it. Like that's why peer
Mhm.
pressure is such a huge thing. Or the group. What's that word?
Group mentality or
Group
something like
mentality is such
that.
a huge thing. I think we all, even if we are very grounded in ourselves, mirror each other in some certain way. So like I definitely
Yeah.
get that. And I think when you noticing yourself not being comfortable with like how you're acting or like not liking the way that you're like being treated by others and how that is affecting you, I think that's when the time you need to cut yourself off from that type of people, which is so hard though in the South Asian community. Because I remember like growing up, I'd be like, these are not some people I like, and my mom's just like, you just gotta deal with it because like cutting them
Yeah.
off is a worse situation, like a worse solution to the problem, because that's just how they were brought up. They were like, if you cut people off, that'll just give bad blood to everybody else. Like, but no, if
Right.
they're not healthy for you, you need to cut them off, because it's just making you feel unhappy with yourself.
Well, and it's also hard to like cut people off who are part of your cultural community, right? Because by
That's
cutting
true.
them off, it's almost like you're saying, like, it's almost viewed as like, oh, you're cutting off the culture. It's like, no, 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 I'm cutting off these very specific people that are giving me some issues in my mental state. It has nothing to do with how I view my culture and how I view it being Indian. It doesn't make me any less Indian for cutting other Indian people out of my life.
Exactly.
Like I think that's what our parents fear when they say things like that, because they're like, "Oh, but you can't cut them off because they're part of our community." It's like, but I'm not cutting off the community. I'm cutting off these people. It's very
Yeah.
different. Very
Yeah.
different. And I think that was it took me so long to like make myself be okay with that.
Exactly. Same with me. I feel like people are so judgmental about it. Like, I'm gonna be honest here. Like, the college time frame, high school college time frame, I told myself I don't think I have the mentality or like the mental strength to date an Indian guy. Like as not it's not stereotypical, as general as that sounds, like just like I want to cut off that type of attitude or mentality from my life because I saw like when I was first interested in some Indian guys, like I did not like the way that I was like handling myself around them. So I told myself I need a break from this, and people were like, "Kirti, you can't just generalize that all Indian boys are going to act like this." And I'm like, well, the people I surrounded myself were exactly like that. So I feel like you
Yeah.
shouldn't invalidate that or like I think it's justified for me and it's okay. Like I'm not like saying like if there's an Indian guy I'm gonna run the other way. I'm just like I'm gonna
Right.
put up a wall because I the experiences that I have haven't been the most healthy and it should be okay. And a lot of people are like, you're just trying to get away from Indian people, aren't you? And I'm like, no, it's just the
No,
way that they're
no.
brought up was just it's too negative for me to handle right now.
It's the personality, not the race or the culture.
Or
Like
it's the
I
way
assure
that
you.
they were brought up in the South Asian
Yeah.
society that I can't
Yeah.
handle right now because I was never brought up like that. So
Right, right. Yeah.
yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah, so people really do influence you a lot. And I guess kind of going into that a little bit more, in the South Asian community there's a huge tendency to equate self-love with selfishness. So you're
Mhm.
taught to put others before yourself at all costs. So how do you feel that has affected you or other people in our community about the idea of self-love?
Yeah, so in my opinion, or the way that I understand like Tamil culture specifically, is Tamilians are really known to be hospitable people. Like in our culture, you come over to our house, you're not leaving until you eat a good warm meal or like at least have
Right,
some
right.
coffee and
Some
snacks.
tiffin.
You
Yeah.
have to leave like with a little bit more weight in you before you enter the house. Like that's how hospitable we are. And I could see that because my parents were always like that. They're always kind to people who enter the house, or they're already open for people to just show up randomly if they ever need anything. So I think the hospitality portion of that part of our culture, or like how we deem society, is like a really big pillar in how like self love is looked at negatively. Because in my opinion, just looking at it from like the experiences that I've had, it seems like self love is kind of shameful or guilt driven, because they're like, you have to think of others first. You can't think about yourself. So I think that's how the idea of self love is not really practiced in our community, in my opinion. But then there's also things like gender roles. Like South Asian women, I feel like struggle with the idea of loving themselves a lot more than South Asian men, just because the idea of them having to balance career goals with modern society. But then like South Asian cultures, like you have to take care of the family. You have to put everybody else's need in your family first before yours, and you have to be humble about it. You have to be elegant. You have to be poised. You're the woman of the household. So I think there's just so much external going on that is like telling everybody like put the self love all the way down, because on that priority list it's not up there, and I think that's why it's not focused on in our community as
Right.
much.
No, like speaking on the gender roles topic, like I think I think gender roles in South Asian culture is very different from Western culture, especially because in South Asian culture, your role in the family, in the community, is to take care of your family. So, and it's very tied to like monetary value. It's very tied to like how well off you are.
Yeah.
Like there's a direct connection between the role as a woman that you play in the household to if you get married or if you like are successful or deemed successful in society. And that connection has been there for the longest time. It's changing now, for sure, with our generation of Indian people and our generation of South Asian American people, both in India, both here, around the world, is changing. It's changing with our generation. But just before our generation, even in our parents' generation, there is still that idea of like, you have to have certain qualifications in order to be deemed successful in society. And it's bad because self love is not up there. Like you said, self love is not in any sort of like it's not there. It's not in the realm of understanding. So I don't know, changing it, like coming here and being preached, like, hey, like it makes sense why we are preached this, right? It makes sense that we are told to be okay with things and sacrifice your own well being for other people because you want to give other people a good time. You want them to be happy just as much as you are, and you want that to be contagious. It's like the same thought process, but it's almost like you have to, like it's kind of forced, like you have
It's more
to.
encouraged.
It's yeah. So I don't know. It's
No,
hard.
like you said though, like how like specific things is kind of like an accumulation determines, like back in the day, I don't know, still could be happening now, it
Right.
was like a woman's like worth in terms of marriage.
Hmm.
The concept of dowry is exactly that. Like,
Yeah.
how much do you put your husband's needs before yours? How much do you value like having children and not going towards your career goals? How much
Hmm.
money does your family have? And it should be more than the husband's family, apparently. Like all these like stupid things add up, and then you're basically that self worth is quantified in dowry. Like this is how much they expect out of you because you're just this great of a person or whatnot. Like that,
Right.
I think that practice is what is negates like the self love. That like just making your self worth materialistic is just such a negative aspect, and I think that is such a huge thing that I wanted to bring up when you talked about that. But you're right.
Yeah.
Once we came to the U.S., or not once we came, but once our parents came, to the US, I think a lot of, I don't know, maybe like a lot of them started to realize like you need to like take care of yourself. Like that's important because you're only going to be there for yourself. Like
Right.
no one else is going to know when you're falling or breaking to help you. Like you have to externally tell that to someone. But like you'll know when you are in time of need. And it kind of
Right.
goes to like that, you know, that rule in the airplane where they're like put your mask on before you put for others. I think
Hmm.
that is a good explanation of like what needs to be practiced in the South Asian community, because you can only help others when you're helping yourself. Like if you are so burnt out and drained, you're not going to be fitting that like expectation of helping others. Like it's just basically
Right.
like useless. It's like you're trying, like you're not helping your case. Like you're just
Right.
basically burning yourself out even more, and it's not
We
helpful to
always
anyone.
Right. We always thrived for that perfection, like we're a machine. We like to treat ourselves like machines in this community for some reason. It's really
Yeah.
fun. I mean, that's changed. That I hopefully that's changed since the pandemic because a lot of people have had that social distance and like
Right.
isolation and a lot of loss and heartbreak and family issues and all this stuff coming about. So maybe that's changed and maybe that will change in the future. But I think, yeah, we treat ourselves like machines. We really just are
Mhm.
like, we got to keep going, got to keep going. Whatever we're doing, it's for the family. We got to just keep going. And we don't even allow ourselves to think that it's okay to take some time for ourselves because,
Right.
and I think this is also like just like being parents in general. And I don't think it's necessarily tied to the South Asian community, even though it's very prominent in our community. It's just like that idea of like, I need to keep working. I'm working and I'm making I want my family to be okay. I want my
Right.
family to be okay. I want my kids to be okay. I want everything to be fine. And as long as I am just working and working and working, then they will be okay. And I think that is transferred into us because it's almost like we grew up watching this happen and we're like, oh, but like, we try to apply those same rules in the individualistic world that we're living in and it's just not equating. It's not equating. Um, like we can't physically. There's not enough time in the world to be working as much as our parents do and have a social life in this
Right.
modern 21st century social media ridden world. Like there's not enough
Right.
time. We got to pick or choose. We got to find a balance and part of that balance is self-love and just knowing, when to take a step back.
Right. And like you said, as kids, we notice things. And I don't think our parents kind of realize that. Like, kids pick up a lot of social
Mhm.
nuances more than you think. Like, as much as people be like, oh, kids won't know anything, they pick up a lot. Like, if you read a lot of
Mhm.
child development books that for parents, like, you can see, like, the small things. Like, it's just a parents arguing how much that affects a child. And I think that's so true. Like, we put ourselves in our parents' shoes. Like, we thought like what our parents were doing is the right thing, but like in that fact, we also need to realize like our parents' way is not always the correct way, and like
No.
trying to recorrect that for ourselves
Yeah.
is what we need to do in order to like break that cycle of like constantly
Right.
like putting yourself over like the other people over yourself. But then also like I can't imagine the stress that our parents go through just because like especially when we're younger, they're also young youthful people back in the day.
Right.
like like the amount of like stress and anxiety that they are like the stress not being able to provide for their children was probably I can't imagine that stress. But I'm sure we're going
Right.
to in the next like 10 or so years when we have our own kids, but
God, but let's
but
not think about
yeah,
that.
let's think about the future.
No, I mean, like you said, like our parents are like when they had us, they literally knew as much as we did, like in terms
right.
of this society and this culture. So in a lot of ways, like as we grew up, they were also altering their mindset. They were changing with us. We were learning with each other. But that's such a huge burden to put on a child, and there's such a huge burden to put on a parent who's also trying to figure out 50 million other things. Like
Right.
it's just a difficult situation that doesn't really have an answer. But now, kind of looking back on it, the only way we can really like adjust ourselves is just accepting their viewpoints, understanding that they're different, and also identifying like, hey, like I'm allowed to take a step back. I'm allowed to love myself. Self love is not selfish, like my parents might have accidentally taught me through their own actions. Like
Right.
I am allowed to care about myself. I'm allowed to only think about myself and yeah, I don't know, it's all good. It'll even itself out. Obviously
right.
don't be an asshole to other people, but I don't know, like
I
it
mean,
is
yeah,
what it
that's a
is,
good
you know.
point.
It is what it is. Just care for yourself, man. Like take a break, my god, we're not machines. Yeah. Okay, well, kind of switching gears a little bit, how do you think like we as first gen Indian Americans could break that cycle and thought process? Do you think there's anything that we can do now so that our children, when we have them, obviously we can't solve everything, but what do you think we could do to change and like put out a better sort of impression on our kids?
right. Right. Like how to break that practice.
Hmm.
Um, so I think that finding that fine line as it is hard, but like I feel like we can do it. find that fine line of like how to use self-love to love others is something that we need to find. And then that could be emphasized through self-care practices. So like some things that I do for self-care is like saying no when I'm just overwhelmed. A lot of
Mhm.
times that's not a typical practice that I kind of was taught, or you should say yes to every opportunity that comes to you because you never know when your opportunities are going to stop. That's how I was growing up. So saying no was really hard for me. And but you need to say that when you're overwhelmed to give yourself a
Mhm.
break, to give yourself like a pause moment. And like going back to for the Parks and Rec, like treat yourself, super important, super important. But also I think like the mentality that we need to have is you need to surround yourself around other people who like make you feel comfortable in who you are. I think that is what helps you get that nurturing environment to help you love yourself and love the people or empathize with the people around you, you know? And
Mhm.
so I guess if we like emphasize those self-care practices in ourselves, I think we can also help others in our family, like also or like people around you that you love, practice them as well. So like yeah, we need to work on ourselves a lot, but also I feel like maybe just like telling your parents, like helping your parents relearn the idea of self-love, from like shame and guilt to like nurturing is super important because as much as you're trying to help yourself, helping them will also make it better environment for others because we talked about how people you surround yourself with influences the way you think.
Mhm.
Will help them relearn as well so that they can surround be when you're surrounded by them. It's not so like I need to put a guard, I need to stop myself from like talking to them and whatnot. Like, I think that's just like some ways that we can break the cycle for our future generation, but even for our current family or people we surround
Mhm.
ourselves with.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I was gonna add to that, like, show don't tell. Don't tell them, like, don't preach your kids about certain things. Just do it. As long as
Right.
they see you, like, as long as they see you setting boundaries, as long as they see you taking breaks, as long as they see you not letting work be your entire life, then they will be okay. And they will also learn to be able to love themselves and put those boundaries for themselves. Like, it's just show don't tell.
Mhm.
Like, just they learn by watching you. It's not really listening. They don't listen. Let's be real. Kids don't listen at all. Like, I never listen to my parents, no offense, but like don't preach it to
Sorry,
them.
mom.
Like, yes, my bad. But like, it's what it is. It is what it is. I have problems listening. It's fine. But like, show don't tell. They watch you more than they listen. So just be yourself.
Right. No,
But
that's
yeah,
well
so
said.
well, thank you. Thank you. I think so too. Well, to conclude this episode, this is really fun, Kirti, talking to you all about all this stuff about self-love and caring about yourself and things that I'm sure that both of us are still working on and will continue to work on forever and ever and ever. I hope you guys enjoyed, our listeners. I hope you guys enjoyed listening to this podcast. This episode is very fun. And I hope you guys catch the next episodes that we're dropping in a bit. So,
We'll see you all in the next one.
yes, bye.
Bye, guys. So before you kind of leave us today, I wanted to give a quick shout out to Ravi Ray Audio. You might have heard that our intro and outro music is a little bit different this season and is definitely upgraded to a next level. That's all thanks to Ravi Ray, who was our last guest in season 2, and he agreed to help us out with our music for season 3. So thank you so much, Ravi Ray, for all your help. And if you guys want to get in contact with him to collaborate with any projects or work with Ravi Ray Audio, we are linking his information to the episode description so you can reach out to him or see all the other projects he's done. And thanks again, Ravi, and we'll see you guys all in the next one.